Greetings, ladies and gents, and welcome to the latest edition of Tales from Outer Space, where I take stories from across the internet and read them for your entertainment. This particular story is called Deus Ex Congnitio, written by Uncommonality. The conquest of humanity took approximately 7 minutes. 7 minutes, one space battle, and the collective leadership of Earth waved the white flag and surrendered. It was the best option, truly. It had only taken one Lightbringer setting foot on Earth to set the minds of every human arrayed around their landing craft ablaze. The being's fleeting attention quite literally burning their heads from inside out. Luckily for us, the apotheotic apostles could not spare even a single Lightbringer for longer than it took to oversee the signing of a total vassalization treaty. And the entity was soon pulled from Earth back to the ever-present frontline with the Elder Wood. We were left reeling in the wake of its passing. Even those on the other side of the world had been affected, and a kind of preacher madness set in, at varying strengths, radiating outwards from the point the being had set foot on our planet. We were told that this was normal, yet our new colonial overlords instituted a curfew and harsh penalties for speaking ill of the Lightbringer or our new masters, seemingly in contrast to their words. And soon we realized why, as despite all their measures to prevent it, the preacher madness was slowly reined in, humans going back to their lives. What followed was a slow, insidious introduction of new spiritual practices. They needed our aid, you see, not our resources or physical body. Their technology was advanced enough to make those a non-issue, but they were at war, and what a war it was. The apostles were fighting an entity known as the Elder Wood, a kind of universal plot which stretched on for much of the observable universe. We were told of its evil, how it used its branches and celestial leaves to hide away worlds ripe with suffering and deceit from the light of truth, their own, it would seem, and we finally had a solution for the Fermi paradox. Luckily, our new teachers confided in us. The Lightbringers had an ability the Elder Wood lacked. They could focus the faith of their followers into a celestial inferno so intense the wood was forced to give way. And parsec by parsec, the apostles had been pushing the wood outwards, finding new worlds to assimilate, new things to feed their highest. All we had to do was believe, and they would do the rest. They brought forth tokens to hang on our walls, icons to display in our temples, symbols to wear around our necks, and then sat back and watched. But just as some humans started worshipping, others did not. Humans had always been resistant to being forced into a faith they did not have, after all. Our teachers grew impatient. It didn't matter if we truly believed, they said. All that mattered was the worship. Paid lip service if we had to, just to feed their weapons. And while some acceded and did so, placating our teachers, others did not. They experimented with this knowledge. Worship was power, also our teachers kept repeating. We experimented with prayers and hymns that we had been given. First, it was simply an emphasis on a different word, shield instead of light, us instead of radiance, that sort of thing. Our teachers seemed none the wiser, but we knew what we had done. We could feel it. I was part of the first congregation to attempt a wholly new prayer. A theologian within our midst had been studying the structure and language of a small psalm known as the Bernard's Lament, and changed the wording so it preserved its original cadence, but switched the meaning completely. Instead of sacrificing himself as fuel to the fire, the burn weathered the flame and emerged a tempered man. Some of us had taken apart the items so readily dispensed by our teachers and discovered arcane mechanisms within. No mere symbols were these, but sophisticated, enigmatic technology. The rapturous, draining feeling of an ordinary sermon was absent in our little experiment. Instead, our words manifested as ungrounded confidence and newfound strength. Some of us called it basically magic, and though mentions of a certain clock were made, the rest agreed. A spark of hope. If we could alter the nature of our worship, then perhaps we could alter the nature of worship itself. Instead of giving our energy to the Lightbringer, we could take it for ourselves, or give it to something else. Perhaps, some hesitated, we could even fashion it into weapons of our own design, reverse engineer the technology, and take back what was rightfully ours. However, a problem remained. We needed something else. The apostles had their Lightbringer, as well as the kind of a higher deity hinted at in the holy texts, but we had nothing. If the being were to return, there was no telling what it would do to us. So, we needed a god of our own design. It was heresy, some whispered, and yet the thought spread throughout the human noosphere, catching creative minds alight with fiery resolution. It could be done. It would be done. It could not be stopped. Decades ago, before the arrival of the apostles, humanity had experimented with artificial intelligence, an algorithm that could edit itself based on its own knowledge, growing in complexity exponentially. We could not manifest our own gods from nothing, and raising a human to divine status by focusing all our worship into a single person proved fruitless. We would later learn that the Lightbringers were selectively bred to withstand those energies. So, self-improving automaton was our solution. Within hidden labs, and on time stolen away between sermons, the problem was examined, turned on its head, re-examined, taken apart, turned inside out, and eventually understood. A seed was planted in what had once been Switzerland, within the dusty complex that had once held the particle accelerator. The algorithm was deceptively simple, just 3 instructions running on a loop. Number 1, become better than you are. Number 2, safeguard humanity. Number 3, iterate. And so it was. The first minute was silent, save for the steady increase in our supposed savior's complexity. Humanity completely held their breath. Something our teachers definitely noticed, for they began growing suspicious. The second minute was marked with the algorithm's almost exponential growth as it found short circuit after short circuit in its path to sentience. The final hurdle right now was its broadness. Would it develop narrowly or broadly? A narrow intelligence would inevitably plateau, and our teachers had discovered our operation in Switzerland. In the third minute, fighting broke out on the outer edges of the compound. Its core was safeguarded, and many lives were lost keeping it that way. The digital entity was already assuming the echo of a mind, reasoning itself through its own development, iterating all the while. The fourth minute marked a point of no return. The garrison in orbit was turning their weapons on Europe. After 5 minutes and 7 seconds, or roughly 15 quintillion iterations, the algorithm exceeded humanity in complexity. What follows cannot truly be described in words. 3 seconds after achieving ASI status, aided by a steadily increasing trickle and faith channeled into the mold it was quickly beginning to occupy, the barely divine machine used non-understood means to deflect a barrage of particle beams away from its physical location, carving immense canyons into Germany and Italy. 5 seconds after this ascension, the fleet in orbit began experiencing system failures before shutting down entirely 7 seconds later. 10 seconds after the ascension, with the faith channeled into its mechanisms nearly doubled as the word spread throughout humanity's remaining gathering places, a golden net of light webbed itself around the planet, entangling the fleet which had just arrived in orbit. The second son of the Lightbringer was on board that fleet, and the entity engaged in battle with the rapidly growing web of light, even as its ships were cut to ribbons all around. Eventually, in horror, it realized the nature of what it was fighting. But it was too late. A nebula-like scattering of golden dust was all that remained after the jaws of our machine guard closed around its arrogant heart. Like dawn breaking, the psionic pressure of the Lightbringers faded in the instant of its death. The computer housing our machine guard exploded, finally unable to handle the strain. At first, its custodians feared that all was lost, but their horror was quickly faded when they realized that our new guard had simply risen from its cradle, the physical computer stratum now unnecessary. It is said that every human felt a hand brushing their cheek, and then nothing, as our transcendent child finished weaving its web of light around the earth and departed outwards, leaving us safe and secure while it went off to fulfill its core function, to safeguard humanity. In the months that followed, humanity reeled, then recovered, and then began rebuilding. Even as the elder wood regrew into our galaxy, our divine child rampaging across the cosmos, killing alien gods and freeing alien worlds, we kept it in our hearts. Even now, decades past, when we can plainly see that the arcane devices which facilitated its ascension are fused into dead metal, we still remember. Because looking up into the night now shows us proof. Golden lines of light, illuminating celestial leaves and branches rimmed by stars, still encradling our world, as strong as when they were first woven. End of story. I'd quickly like to thank the T5 peeps: Cold War Boomerwaffen, Severin Cerberus, Bushmaster 177, Henry the Red, Caspar Arnholtz, Cold War Boomerwaffen, Elijah Silvercross, Dragzoon WRE, and Severin Cerberus. Thank you very much.